26, I was a full-time professor, and that was when my health started really failing. It was after I got a transplant at the age of 25 in my third year of graduate school. I took like a month off of school, and my mom gave me a kidney, and I kind of came right back after that. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm healthy, everything's great, and I'm normal, for about 4 years, everything was great. And then that kidney started failing right after I got married, and that was when my rare disease really flared up, and it was more than kidney failure. It was I couldn't do much of anything. I was missing a lot of blood for some reason. We didn't know where it was going. They didn't know I wasn't bleeding from anywhere, and they kept doing internal tests to see where my blood was going, but it was just disappearing in my body, which now we know is it's a hemolysis is what that's called, and that's just when red blood cells are kind of pop like balloons because they're scraping against essentially we have these microscopic blood clots in our veins, and when our immune system triggers, it makes little tiny blood clots. It sort of makes your blood sort of stick together, and it's kind of gravelly, and so it rips apart all your red blood cells, and it's like your blood disappears.
You're very good at describing that graphically.
I kind of try to explain it for lay people, so that because I've had to do that to understand what's going on. It's a very complicated disease. Mm-hmm. So essentially, we discovered that I had this rare disease called AHUS, and at the time they were like, this is a kid's disease. It's why it took them so long to diagnose me. And I also live in Oklahoma, which has terrible healthcare, and the doctors were not looking for it, and assumed, it's a rare disease. We shouldn't. Obviously, she doesn't have that. But it was actually an intern that diagnosed me accidentally. She was like, I read this in a textbook. Could it be this? And they were like, no, that's really rare. And she was like, okay, let's test it anyway. And then it ended up being that. So I made sure she got an A. Yeah. I never saw her again either. I'm always on the lookout for her, but I don't know where she went. So that was back in 2011 was when I was actually diagnosed. And then my kidneys were too scarred to come back. So my husband had to give me a kidney. And that was in 2013 when he gave me that kidney. And I wrote a play about that, about the entire experience. And it was produced in Chicago and here in Oklahoma. I never pursued it beyond that because I'm kind of in the middle of Act 2 now. Yeah. So I'm gotta wait until I have a good ending because I'm waiting for my third transplant, and it's been a year of going from transplant center to transplant center trying to find one that is willing to transplant me because every transplant you have, it's harder to find a match because you're building antibodies to attack things. And so I have a lot of donors. It's not a shortage of donors that I have. I'm really lucky. It's finding the kidney that I'm not going to reject immediately. Yeah. So most recently, the Oklahoma Transplant Center was ready to go with a kidney that when I went to Chicago to get a second opinion on, they said, this is a terrible match. You'll reject it immediately. So my gut instinct, which is don't trust Oklahoma, ended up being really, really important because had I transplanted, we would right now be in the middle of a third rejection, which is really hard on your body. So now I have a lot of we had scheduled the transplant for February and then it was canceled 2 days before the surgery. So we were ready to go. We had the kidney. We were, she was ready. I was ready. We were about to go under. And then 2 days before it was just all that energy absolutely just dissipated into the wind. And now we're waiting to hear about whether or not we can join a donor pool to get a new kidney or whether or not we can find a donor that has a kidney I can use, or sometimes they do switches where there's 6 donors and 6 recipients, and then we all swap kidneys. It's like a big puzzle. Yeah. So I'm just waiting for some kind of word. It's been 2 months since it was canceled, and I haven't heard anything yet. So essentially, I came back here because my family lives up there, and I was staying up there, and now I'm here. And it's very uncomfortable because I don't trust anybody in the medical system here. And so it's just like whenever I'm in the hospital or in the doctor, there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of, you guys don't even know what you're doing. And I have to stop you from accidentally killing me on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
So it causes a lot of stress and anxiety and distrust of the medical system. When you have failure, it's kind of a classist disease too. It's they have technology that's amazing for other things, but for kidney failure, because poor people generally have it, they don't have really good research put into it. Transplant is the best you can get. If you're on dialysis, it's like you're using 80s technology to stay up. It's very primitive. You have to carry this big dumb machine with you everywhere. You have to carry like liters of fluid if you're going to go on a trip somewhere. It's really inconvenient and it's sort of depressing. And I think it's purposefully depressing because it's expensive and they don't want people to survive very long on it. So they make it as dire as possible so that you want to come off of it. That's how it feels, at least to me.
That's a very fair assessment, I think. I've been reading a little bit about like the bionic kidneys that they're trying to create and the kidney printing and things like that, but it still seems like people are like, I'm signing up, put me on the list, and they're like, well, we're still still have a ways to go. But
every doctor I've asked about that, they're like, yeah, that's not happening anytime soon, so don't wait for it. I was like, okay, great.
Yeah. Can we, I'm really sorry to hear that you have to wait. I hope that something comes up so soon. I think on one of your posts you had named your kidney Adonis?
Yeah. Well, Aurelia is my mom's kidney, and Apollo is...
Okay. Oh, sorry. Apollo, that's right.
Yeah. And Mitzi and Ditzy are mine.
And then, can I ask where the names came from?
Yeah, I asked my donors to name their kidneys for me. I asked my mom what she wanted to name hers, and she came up with Aurelia, which I thought was a really great name. And I asked Matthew what he wanted to name his, and he came up with Apollo. So I kind of, I let the donor name it, and they chose those. And I thought they were both really great names. For how they behaved too. My mom's was obviously an older kidney and was like, this place is a mess, and functioned really well for 8 years. And his was like a big hero in a cape that kind of swept in and saved my life because I was in really bad shape. So this one, I don't know, it's up to whoever the donor is, and if it's a donor I don't know, I don't know what I'll do. I might I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get to it, but I like to have the donors have some kind of say since it's their organ.
Yeah. It's really fascinating to me because my dad had a cadaveric donor, so we have no idea. And in Canada, they no longer, and have not for at least 3 decades, tell you who the anonymous donor is, because there was like some issues with people like doing emotional blackmailing, etc. To be like, oh, my family needs money and my son gave you a kidney, so therefore you should support us. Or,
oh my God.
Or like, oh, my daughter would never do that, so therefore you should not live your life like that because my daughter wouldn't approve. So like weird things like that. So we've always, it's been a big mystery, I guess. We have no idea really who it was. And so the same way that you're like looking for the nurse, I'm kind of like, what are the odds that somehow with this project? But I asked my dad if he named his kidney, and he kind of looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, I name everything. My car, my laptop, everything's got a name. So, yeah, I'm happy to see that I'm not the only one.
Well, yeah, and as you get, they're not going to take any of these out. So for my next transplant, they're just going to put another one in. So I'll have 5. So it's just easier to refer to them by names when I'm talking about them, you know? I'm going to have 5 kidneys in my body, so, which is absurd to me, but, they won't start taking things out. I have a lot of things I don't need in there. Like, take my ovaries, take my uterus out. I don't need it. My appendix, I don't know, just preemptively scoop things out.
Create some space.
Just cause problems. But it is interesting, the cadaver thing. I was just talking about this because when especially now having lost 2 from donors and watching the emotional turmoil that happens when a donor kidney fails. I think having a cadaver and not knowing and not letting that person know, because with my donor now, it's like, okay, you are either going to watch me die or you're going to watch this kidney die. It's going to be one of those.
Yeah.
And, you know, that process, you just have to talk about immediately, and they don't bring that up in evaluation. They don't talk about what's going to happen when it fails, if it fails, and what that's going to do to your relationship, because it has affected us emotionally. Because my body is rejecting a kidney, so it's like I'm rejecting their relationships as well in some ways. You know, they feel responsible, and so there's a lot of guilt attached to losing someone else's organ like that, even if it's not a choice, obviously.
Yeah.
But
do you think it's kind of an equal part to like you feeling guilt that they now are suffering their guilt, or you know, like, because my understanding is that like people don't really know what triggers kidney disease. They don't know. So it became very important to my dad that he felt at the end that like he had let down his kidney, like he had failed it in some way. It was like really impossible for him to feel that the kidney had failed him. So he felt like he had to justify that he had somehow failed the kidney. So do you think that is part of how the guilt ties into it?
For sure, because you go over every choice you ever made, and you think, you know, I could have been more diligent with taking my pills on time. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I didn't eat well enough. Maybe I didn't drink enough water. Maybe, you know, if I had done this or if I had done that, I could have stretched it out a little bit more. Or, you know, like you really do second guess everything that you did, because for my disease, it's my immune system attacking them, but the reason my immune system revs up is because it's not suppressed enough. So, you know, like my second transplant center, the University of Iowa, denied doing my 3rd transplant. They said no when I went and I got evaluated, and they actually invited me back to be evaluated, and they said, yeah, we'll transplant you a second time, because my first one was in Virginia, my second one was the University of Iowa. And so I went back to Iowa saying, okay, that one failed. Can we do another one? And they said no, because, and in my play, there's this whole dance number where I literally worship them. It's like the scene in Annie when she goes to Daddy Warbucks' mansion. It's like there's this musical number and these bright scrubs, and they treat them like royalty. And so I always felt like a rock star. They put us on their pamphlets. They did a photo shoot and like an interview with us, and it was
I watched that. That was neat.
It was awesome. So when I came back and they said, no, we're not transplanting you because we feel like your aftercare was inadequate, and we feel like their reasoning was they thought that I wasn't properly taking care of myself after the transplant. And it was because they weren't getting all of the results from my labs from Oklahoma. So my Oklahoma doctor, which I thought they were getting all my results because I figured everyone was getting everything. But apparently they weren't getting, because they're on 2 different computer systems. Oklahoma's the worst. So the entire time, instead of telling me, hey, we're not getting your lab results, and I was busy and I was dying and I was, you know, I was going through a rejection through chemotherapy. I was sick, like fucking sick. And they blamed me for it and said, we're not going to transplant you because we don't think that a successful transplant is going to happen a 3rd time. We think that you're going to lose it quickly because of your actions, essentially. And so it was like this huge betrayal of the center that diagnosed me in the first place, and it's where the AHUS experts are. So they were family to us, and then they turned us down and wanted me to appeal, and I was like, fuck off, I'm going somewhere else. The only reason I came to you was because you transplanted me before and I trusted you, and now you make me feel like I'm not welcome. So I went to Chicago, and that's where I'm from. and they have really great medical care. So I'm now being evaluated for the third time at a transplant center that's brand new to me, because my second transplant center kind of betrayed me. But they blamed me for it.
Yeah,
they really did.
It's really bizarre, the medical industry, of how they're... Like, did they acknowledge that they had misread the situation and without the intern would not have... But, you know, you clearly didn't. Like, this thing that nobody really understands fully, if you didn't drink enough water, which, yeah, you just drank something, I'm like, I feel really dehydrated.
Right? So sweet. I mean, clearly, I can't control my antibodies.
No.
You know, wish I could. If I could, I mean, I don't choose to be on dialysis. I would much rather not be on dialysis, you know. But I'm also a busy person, and I have a lot of things I'm doing. And so staying at home and taking care of my body 24 hours a day is not the best usage, in my opinion, of my skills. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm trying to get to a transplant so that I can get back to the things that I'm passionate about, which is not 24-hour thinking about my body.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think, I mean, you said that you became very ambitious with getting through school and getting through things, and then now you're doing all the intimacy choreography. Oh, congratulations. I saw that you and Scott got the PCTP. That's great. So how do you feel like it's affected your diagnosis and the disease? How do you think that it's kind of affected your path from when you're like 16, what you thought? Like, do you think that, I guess this is a deeper question than just like, oh, I changed career paths. It's kind of more like, do you think that your personality has changed because of it? Do you think that how you make decisions has changed? In what ways? I assume that decision making has changed, but in what ways?
For sure. Yeah. Well, I think being in the arts is really interesting when you have a very difficult illness to survive, because you'd think that being super sick and knowing that at any moment you could die from it changes your decision-making skills a lot. It makes certain things important and other things really not important. And it makes you compartmentalize how you spend your time very differently. I don't waste a lot of my time or energy doing things that I don't feel are worth my time, because I don't only have so much energy. So when I decide I'm going to pursue something, I'm going to drop mostly everything else to do it. And in that process, you know, for about 5 years, I really focused on rare disease advocacy and branding myself in the rare disease world, because I thought it was important, and I wanted to research it, and I wanted to help change legislation. And then Trump got elected, and I was like, fuck this, it's not even going to be worth it. So I actually stopped advocacy almost because of the election. And the election also brought in all these intimacy requests. So as I dropped rare disease stuff, Trump was campaigning, and my phone started ringing off the hook because the women's movement really got triggered at the same time. And that was when my health really started failing again. So it all happened really at the same time. And ironically, I had decided just before Trump that it was important for me to pursue intimacy for the stage full throttle. And I was like, I'm going to make this a thing, and I'm going to make it happen. I've been doing it for, you know, at that point, 12 years. And I was like, it's not going to happen until I really put the gas on and find a team and make an organization. So that started in about 2015 was when I made that switch. And then once I did, I found my co-founders, and they had already been sort of choreographing this stuff lightly as fight directors, but hadn't really found a technique. And I was like, I'll teach you my technique. Let's do this together, because I knew that a team would be better than me screaming into the void by myself, which I had been doing for 12 years and wasn't progressing, especially here in the Bible Belt, you know? So I was like, I need a team and I need people to get on board. And I don't have a whole lot of time left. So, you know, it kind of puts this sense of urgency behind everything you do. You try really hard to, you know, this now I've decided is like, okay, I set a goal and this is going to be my legacy. It's, can I get this ball rolling fast enough down this hill that if something happens to me, it can roll without me? And that was really my life goal. And now that I feel like that's happened, I'm like, shit, I need a new goal. You know, like I got to think bigger. I got to think more global. I have to think internationally. And so switching gears to plan something a little bit bigger at the same time as trying to find this transplant, it gives me an urgency to find a transplant in a way, because, you know, there's so much more to do that. And then there's a part of you that's like, well, if I died from kidney failure, it probably would really launch this idea forward too. So, you know, like
nothing like a good martyr start.
You do. You kind of think about these things. You're like, you know, I don't have children, so what is my legacy? And, you know, do I want to at least try to have some kind of name in the movement towards equality on stage in the arts, in the way people are treated, the way we see harassment and abuse? This has been my thesis for my entire life, and it became a mainstream topic about 2 years ago, like a year ago, 2 years ago. That's when it really became on the tip of everybody's tongue. And it was like, hey, I've been doing this for a while. I've got some research for you. I've been, you know, I'm ahead of this. And it was really perfect timing. So I don't know. I think that the disease makes you focus harder, but it also offers you a huge set of challenges that teaches you how to deal with things easier, you know? It's like, okay, you want to change the world, but you also have a chronic illness. So, you know, the sicker I get, I feel like the more successful I am in a way. It has this weird balance to it. And I think it's just the passage of time.
Do you think that like how it correlates between your success and your sickness? Because that's an interesting thing of, are they correlated? Is it like because your drive is more focused and you're kind of like cutting away the rest of the waste? You're like, no, this is all I have. I have to do this one thing. Versus as artists, it takes us, I think, a long time to be like, I'm not going to say yes to everything. And usually that finally becomes an effort in self-care where you're like, oh, I can choose which projects I want to work on, as opposed to I have to say yes because otherwise people will stop asking me and I'll never get any roles and I just need to be seen. You know, like that kind of flakiness. Whereas if I guess it's rude to call it flakiness, but versus if it's like very like, no, I have to do this now. Or do you think that like, is there something about dealing with the disease that you like? I don't know where I'm going with this question, but I feel like it becomes people who I've noticed who have like dealt with disease for a long time and have found a way to like live with the disease as opposed to just like, you know, circling in 24 hours at home, can't do anything, but people have managed to live. There seems to be an energy that they put into the world. And I don't know if it's because they are thinking of like impact and they're thinking not like, how do I get famous, but like, how do I leave the world a little bit better? And so I think that's the energy that starts getting put out.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that people who have a terminal illness, and even if you don't think of it as terminal, but I mean, most chronic illnesses are kind of terminal in some way, you know?
Yeah.
They lead to the shortening of your life. So immediately you start thinking of your mortality. And I don't think a healthy 37-year-old would be thinking, I have to do this before I die, you know?
Yeah.
If I didn't have that disease, I don't think that I would be pushing myself as much. I'm not going to say that I was a lazy kid. I was always pretty ambitious, but I wasn't as focused before I had the disease. The disease made me really focus, procrastinate less. It made me go, you know what, I'm just going to contact this journalist and be like, hey, just so you know, this is what I'm doing. You know, it makes you find your own doors to walk through instead of wait for them to come to you.
I mean, it seems obvious to me that there's also, like, intimacy choreography is about owning your body, and sickness is when control is taken away from you about your own body. And I'm sure you have at some point thought of the connections between them and all that jazz?
Well, for the most part, it desensitizes everything when you have to be naked on a table in front of strangers. And, you know, you learn how to approach the body very clinically through going through a medical thing. You don't have an option. Everything is happening to you. And body functions you become desensitized to everything. Everything is just the body. So as a movement person, it was really easy to kind of go to an anatomical clinical place when choreographing intimacy, that it still has a sexuality to it, and there's still an intimacy between people, which is the majority of what I spend time on, is getting people to look at each other versus, you know, looking at their phones all the time. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, treating the body like the anatomical clinical thing it is when choreographing these things has helped actors look at choreography more easily, so that it's not personal. Just like stage combat, there's choreography. Intimacy has choreography, and it helps actors relax more when there's choreography versus saying, okay, just like try something, which is like, you know, it causes a lot of anxiety because there's no choreography in it, and you're just improvising intimacy, which is terrifying. So a lot of it is based off of a clinical explanation of the body. And I don't blush when I talk about sex, really. It's just, you know, even when I was interviewed for the New York Times and we were talking about a set and how there was a clitoris on the middle of the stage. And for me, it was like, oh yeah, there's a clit on stage. And they were like, you know, when they asked the director, she was like, oh, there is a clitoris on stage. You know, that I don't have any problem talking about the body. And, you know, and whereas a lot of conservative people, or just in general, people find it less clinical, that it's personal and it's weird. And so a lot of what I do is trying to desensitize people. It's just a body. Erections happen. Periods happen. You know, we don't have to be ashamed of body functions. It's just part of the job. So I think that there is a desensitization that has crossed over because of the medical stuff, but also has allowed me to help people really be with each other, be present with each other, which is the technique. Is how do we find chemistry? You can find chemistry with anybody if you're just present with them and concerned about their humanity as a person versus the preconceived notions that you have of this person and whether or not you're attracted to them. Doesn't matter. The character is attracted. Yeah. So your sexuality has nothing to do with this. And so a lot of that is separating your personal shit from the character's shit and figuring out how to play in there and then leave and come home and not take it with you. Yeah. You know, that's the technique. So it's all related. It very much is. Yeah. And the medical stuff has just helped me desensitize even faster.
Thing that people do not understand about kidney disease or transplants. Like, I find it's not something that people talk about very much. Or there's not a lot of knowledge around what it actually means. Is there one thing that's like the core thing that you feel like you have to explain all the time to people, or is it as simple as that?
Yeah, I try to really over glamorize my illness, as you'll see. I don't think people understand how taxing it is to have a chronic illness while you're trying to be an artist, or just what it's like to have a disability in general. That disabled people have a drive because they have to. You know, that they've been through some stuff and it's harder to do the normal things. So I think they do set goals. You know, whenever I go to rare disease advocacy conferences, I think everybody there is just so focused and ambitious and like inspirational because they have these stories of survival in their toolkits, you know, just on a daily basis, that people on dialysis have to choose to survive every single day. Because if I don't hook up to that machine, in 2 or 3 days, I will have to be hospitalized because I can't function without it. So it's not a question of, you know, like I see healthy people shortening their lives all the time by their actions, you know, and I have to decide to lengthen my life every day. And it changes your perspective. It's like, you know, you make decisions sort of differently. I'm finding now, you know, in my 20s, I lived a little bit more irrationally. But now as I'm getting closer to 40, I'm like, you know, I don't know how I can extend this. I think that people don't know a lot about kidney failure because it's not like cancer. Cancer affects everybody equally. Kidney disease is really a classist disease. It's you know, you go on Medicare for us. It's a government-funded program that the second you have kidney failure, the government takes over, which is the only thing that happens here where the government takes over for us, for healthcare. Everything else, the government's like, we don't want it, we don't care. Medicare kicks in as soon as you go on dialysis here. So it's government-funded, which means the poorest people are on it. Rich people get transplants or have a way to get past it. But generally, it affects minorities more. So when you're in a kidney transplant or you're in a dialysis center, it looks like, a lot of times it looks like a rundown bus station in some ways, versus walking into a cancer center and there's like saltwater fish tanks, there's free lunches, there's, you know, everybody's skylights and waterfalls and just like really expensive stuff. People fund cancer. Yeah. They don't fund kidney failure. So experiencing both worlds, it's very evident what we as a society have deemed as worth saving and things that are not worth saving. So, you know, when you get to be on dialysis, you're like, okay, despite the fact that it feels as if everybody wants me to die faster, I have to overcome that and try to get past this. So I think the daily reminder of your mortality on dialysis is numbing sometimes. It numbs you to the thought of death because it's so close. In an apocalypse with no power, I'm screwed. You know, zombie apocalypse, everyone should just kill me and eat me because I can't survive.
So I just had this thought the other day. I'm like, it's really weird to me that people are like so open about, like, everybody has a plan, it seems, for the zombie apocalypse or the regular apocalypse. And like, you know, if there's a big power outage, a whole bunch of my friends, they're all heading up north cottage country. Some of them, like, they're hunters. They're like, I got my gun. Like, I just got to take it up to the cottage. They have like the Costco apocalypse, like, first aid kit. But then when you're like, so, have you signed your organ donor card? It can be like, well, I don't want to tempt fate. Because if I sign my card, then fate will decide that the bus is going to hit me because I've signed my card and they really need those organs. And I was like, so, zombie apocalypse, we're not tempting fate. But, like, actual real life situation where you could do something in the event that you can't do anything is very, very crazy to me. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I have like a couple more questions, if that's okay. I've also been writing down, you've had some really great quotes, and I don't think the video recorder is working, but I have been tape recording it on my phone, so I'm hoping that... I also feel like I should tell you that some of your quotes may end up in the script, because you've had some really good lines, so I hope that's okay.
Awesome.
So, the first question, how would you define worthy?
Worthy.
Yeah.
Worthy. I think that that's a personal kind of choice in some ways. That's a twofold answer. I feel like you can decide what is worthy as far as your actions, like how my impact in the world. Am I a person that was worth being here at all? Am I somebody who tried to leave things better than when I saw them originally? Am I worthy of having a third transplant? Am I worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Is a question I actually ask myself a lot. I have a list of accomplishments that I've literally written down so I can show my donors what I did because of them,
mm-hmm.
what I was able to do because they gave me kidneys. You know, on my mom's list, I've got married, went to grad school, you know, became a professor, and you know, and that was really great for her. That she as my mother, those are all important things
mm-hmm.
for me to have accomplished with her help. With my husband, it was more career-focused goals of being able. I think that if you generally are contributing to humanity in some way, whether that's on a small, tiny scale of, hey, I raised a person and they're not serial killers, all the way to, you know, I'm president of the United States and I'm trying to guide this country, or, you know, mm-hmm. prime minister, and I'm trying to change things for the better. Whether it's on a global scale or on a micro scale, I feel like humanity in general we're all just trying to make things a little more pleasant for each other to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're contributing to that, then I feel like everybody has worth, but that's what makes somebody worthy, is making humanity thrive versus making us fear and distrust each other. But I'm a humanist, mm-hmm. so that's kind of a very philosophical stance that I take on that.
I think that it's a very hard question in general, and like so the idea popped into my head based on an email as per the website. And I've been actually shocked at how many times worthy has come up as a thing in conversation with people in like the last 3 years since that email. Like I knew that it was a thing, but I have never heard it so many times, that it comes up so many times, of like how people justify, and how it's very different, like how an artist justifies whether they should have got a grant. Like, what is it about their project that is like so worthy of that grant money? And in some cases, I feel like the impact section, which should be the big section, is really like bull, right? Like people are just like, oh yeah, we're gonna have some talkbacks, and we're gonna have 20 people come see the show in a school group, and it's gonna just change their lives. As opposed to like actually like, what is the purpose of this art? Because, you know, it's a very complicated conversation, and it also changes of like, how do you think someone else is worthy versus how do you prove your worthiness to someone else? I think is a very fascinating question. So if you did not know your third donor, but they find a donor for you, what do you imagine they would be like? Is there a personality trait, or are there characteristics of somebody who decides to be a living donor?
An altruistic living donor? Or
anything. Is there something, like, is there consistencies between your mom and your husband other than they both love you and want you to be well? Versus if you find someone who maybe you don't know, or the people who have said yes to being a potential donor to you, match pending, is there a common thread? Or how do you visualize donors in your head?
I think that in my case, the people that have stepped forward to offer, or even to just say, you can take mine, even casually, are generally people who because some have been close to me, and a lot of them aren't always close. You know, sometimes they're just acquaintances who feel like they want to be part of keeping me here longer, mm-hmm. which is a very humbling experience, you know, knowing how fragile the human life really is, and for somebody to be willing to sacrifice their own health, essentially, to possibly shorten their lives in order to lengthen yours, or even just increase the quality of your life so that you can accomplish things, is a very emotionally overwhelming experience. And I think it takes bravery, but I don't think that's the thing. I think it's more, I think it takes a person who, of course, they have to love you, but that's not always the case. It's somebody who wants to contribute to the cause, whatever your cause is. And everybody has a different cause. Other people with transplants have their own causes, you know, and sometimes they have kids that they need to raise. And other people want to contribute to that cause of, you know, I have a lot of transplanted friends with this disease who don't have careers, they have kids. And so their energy is going into that. And they're no less worthy of living a long life. I think everybody is worthy of that. But people who try to get transplants, because transplant's not something that falls in your lap. Transplant's something you have to actively search out to get. So you have to fight to get a transplant. It's not like it comes to you. You gotta go research it. You gotta find a transplant center. You gotta sell yourself in that evaluation. You have to say, this is what I'm doing in society. This is why I'm worthy of having a transplant. You literally have to say those things in the office. And this last time I found myself, you know, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. I'm writing a book. I'm trying to stop abuse and prevent harassment in the arts. Look at all the things I'm trying to do. You know, it felt like I was selling myself, like a weird, you know, commercial of, please save me, I'm worth it.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like no one should have to do that.
Yeah.
Everybody should be worthy of trying to extend their life. But when you've had to sell your life, it makes you want to beef up your resume. In those instances.
That's another great one. That's a good one. And I guess I'm sure that I'll have more. Oh, no, I do have two more. So I know that when the kidneys failed, it had a very challenging effect on your relationships. But when the offer was made and it went through and it was successful, how did that change your relationships to your donors, which were your mom and your husband?
We got the process of experiencing the surgery and the post-surgery of healing together is really emotional. I remember the first moment that I saw both of them after the surgery, and you're just so overwhelmed because you can't think of anything to say, so you just say thank you. But this is this huge sacrifice, and especially for my mother, because that was way back in 2005 when surgeries were a little more dangerous, you know. So, and I knew she was older than they would wanted a donor to be, so I was like, she knows she could die in a surgery. There's always that chance, and so they're risking their lives for you in a way. And my mom didn't even look back. It was like they wheeled her away. She's like, I'm ready. Let's do this. And I was freaking out for the first transplant. For the second transplant, I was very anxious, and he was pretty anxious, you know, being my husband and not my mother. I'm sure that made him it was different for him. But the initial experience of, we both survived this thing. Now we're walking up and down the hall together, and it's a bond that is unlike any other bond I can describe, going through it with somebody. And which is why I'm actually really careful about, you know, the third donor. It's like, this is somebody who's now going to be attached to you forever. Yeah. And so, you know, it's almost better for them to be somebody you don't know in some ways. But if it is somebody that you do know, that relationship is just forever changed. And there is an ounce of, I owe you everything for saving me. But both of them have been very humble about it. They've been very, you don't owe me anything, you know. I wanted to do it. It was my choice. And that's how donors generally are. But I'd say, I don't know, I'm kind of going off topic, but I feel like it's a very close bond that is like no other human bond I can describe. It's kind of like, I don't have kids, so I'm sure it's probably similar to that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you've imprinted yourself onto this person's life forever in a totally different way. Mm-hmm. Like, as if you were saving them from railroad tracks before a train comes. Mm-hmm. You know, they owe you, they feel like they owe you forever. I feel like I owe them forever. Mm-hmm. And so that can come with guilt, but it can also come with joy and a happiness and a bond. Mm-hmm. And that the two of them bond in that, mm-hmm. that they've both tried to extend my life. And so I'm excited for that, but, you know, that's where all the work starts, is after the transplant, really.
Mm-hmm. In what way?
Is emotionally preparing for the aftermath of the stress. Are we going to keep this kidney? Is this kidney going to fail? You know, can I keep it going? Am I diligent about my aftercare? Are they going to see if something goes wrong? Are they immediately going to get on it? You know, it being my third transplant, I'm going to have to be much more careful with it than the other two, you mm-hmm. know? So, because if things go wrong, they'll go wrong fast. And the thing with kidneys is they never come back. They're not like the liver. Yeah. They start scarring and they just keep failing. Mm-hmm. So once you start going that way, it continues. But the initial happiness of the transplant it's like better than any other day I've experienced, both of those. Waking up from that surgery is the most joyful high that I can describe. It's like you immediately feel better and you immediately feel grateful and you want to be next to them. Mm-hmm. It's like, I have to see them. I have to see him. I have to see her, you know? Yeah. And then you just want to be next to them. It's like their kidney is like, where's my body?
It wants to find its way back.
Yeah.